Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys football. Just finished up watching the Wisconsin football's 2023 spring game. It's a new era. Luke Fickell and another guy I don't think enough people are talking about is Phil Longo coming in as the offensive coordinator. You got your first chance to see some of the new faces in the transfer portal, but more importantly, what this team is going to look like, especially on the offensive side of the ball with Phil Longo taking over. I liked a lot of what I saw. Now, you saw some things that Tanner Mordecai had a couple picks. I get that. But in terms of the scheme, I think you really like what you saw. Now, before we get into it again, just want to say thank you to you guys. It's the Wisconsin fans. You guys have been awesome. Whether we're talking recruiting, whether we're talking the Luke Fickell era, you guys have shown a ton of support. We can't thank you guys enough for all of it. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dale, I'm going to kick this one off to you. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball because I think that is the bigger storyline in terms of this team's going to look a lot different than it has in years past. What were your initial takes there?
Just from today and kind of what I expect moving forward is I kind of wonder if we're going to see, again, they're going to play more in the spread, but I almost wonder how that's going to impact the rushing attack because today it looked really good and running a little bit more in space and not being so line up with three tight ends and just try to jam it down people. But can you get running backs in space, get them running out of the shotgun with four wide receivers and just spread a little more out because today that's kind of what they were doing. And I thought at times Malusi and especially
Braylon Allen
looked really good.
That was one of my main takes heading into this year is you are going to spread out. That is Phil Longo's offense. He comes from the air raid tree, and you are going to throw the football more than you used to with Graham Mertz and Paul Chryst. That being said, the number one benefiter I think that we'll see is the run game. Because when you're spreading everyone out, you're not going to – when you have the ability to push the ball down the field, when you have dynamic playmakers at the wide receiver room that we'll talk about in a little bit, teams aren't going to be able to put 7, 8, 9-man boxes again. Wisconsin saw that a lot in 2022. Now, in Graham Mertz, you really didn't have much of a threat throwing the football. And so a lot of teams were bringing down safeties. You were seeing 8 and 9-man boxes. Braylon Allen was able to be successful because he's one of the best running backs in the country. But imagine Braylon Allen running with 5-man boxes because that's when you saw that Wisconsin offense really get it going in the spring game. It was when they said, hey, we have one of the best offensive lines in the country. We have one of the best running backs in the country. We're going to get back to what we know best in terms of our personnel, and that's run the football.
And that's I don't see Longo go to what he did necessarily at UNC when they threw the ball pretty much every time they touched it because why would you when you're Wisconsin? That's probably the top place of recruiting is that offensive line and where you're putting NFL players in relatively consistently. And you got guys like Jack Nelson and Tanner Bortolini and Renfro coming over in the transfer portal. You have a loaded group, I think.
Yeah, very good group.
Why would you go away from it just to Longo's not just going to jam his scheme or what he's done in the past into the offense. I just think what you're going to see is, again, play a little more loose, play a little less 10 men in the box. And
try that's what it is. This just space. And one of the other things that, Phil Longo, yes, he comes from the air raid tree. He used to run the ball when they had Michael Carter and Javonte Williams. They would run the football at UNC too, and it was really successful. Both those guys averaged over 6 yards per carry under Phil Longo. Why? Because teams had to play too high safety. They could not put a lot of people in the box because if you do that, like Tanner Mordecai and those weapons on the outside, they will be able to beat you. And I think that's what's really going to help this Wisconsin offense is they're going to be able to run the football, and they're not going to be able to see 8, 9-man boxes on the defensive side. Now, I do want to talk about throwing the football because you are going to see a lot more of that. They're going to spread you out. They're going to put the ball into playmakers' hands in space. The wide receiver room, my take on the spring game is there was a lot of talk about C.J. Williams, Bryson Green coming over in the transfer portal, and the explosiveness they were able to bring. I think a lot of people, especially in the national media, maybe not as much Wisconsin fans, kind of forget that Wisconsin has a lot of receivers coming back from the 2022 season, and they're damn good receivers that just didn't really get a chance to show what they were about because of how Wisconsin runs their offense the last couple of years.
And that's the thing. I feel like I know people want to see transfers, and that is fun, and it's a new part of the game, but you do have 3 wide receivers, the guys you just mentioned, who are going to be very hard to unseat, and frankly, I think they're going to take the bulk of the snaps. I mean, you look at a guy like Chimere Dike. I think if he's on a lot of other teams, he is putting up big numbers. I really, really like Skylar Bell in terms of what he can do in space and be more of that slot receiver. So you Yeah, what you said is you have a really good group, and for Mordecai, it's just got to be. Hey, you can't make the mistakes he was making today in terms of throwing picks, but it's just got to be, can you distribute it? And the only times he's going to need to really make hard throws, or for the most part, I think, is to DK if they're going to take shots, and that's what DK does. And he's a good contested catcher, so you just got to give him a shot. But the other guys, I mean, Bell and Keontez Lewis, they're both really dynamic with the ball in their hands. It shouldn't be that hard to get them the football.
Yeah, in evaluating the quarterback play, I think it'd be hard. We're not going to like stand up here and say Tanner Mordecai played exceptional. Like, he turned the ball over, I believe, 4 times, and that is way too much for this Wisconsin football team. That being said, one went through the hands. One was, I mean, like maybe just some play. We saw J.J. McCarthy 2 weeks ago in Michigan spring game, just airmail one early and for an interception, then settled in. Tanner Mordecai's the guy. I don't think
the weather was bad. It's not like we should totally ignore that. I know it did get nicer towards the end, but when the ball's slick and it's in the spring and you're in a new system, it is what it is. But we know what he can do. We know that if he's given the chance, he's going to be really pretty efficient and he can get the ball out and have a high completion percentage. All those things that I think is going to be really important for Wisconsin, as they're probably still going to be led by those running backs, especially Braylon Allen. But they just need to bring that other part along, and I think he is certainly the guy for it.
And he's the guy for a year, right? He's one of the more productive FBS quarterbacks coming around. I mean, previously at Oklahoma, goes to SMU, is one of the more prolific quarterbacks in the FBS for the last couple of years. He's from that similar offense, the RPO, so the ball handling's all there. In terms of the future, we're mostly talking about 2023, but in terms of the future, you feel really good about Wisconsin and their quarterback room, because Braden Locke, I thought, looked phenomenal as their quarterback too. A lot of people talked about Nick Evers, who was kind of more the highly recruited guy from the 2022 class, but Braden Locke's also coming from Mississippi State, who was worked with Mike Leach, rest in peace, but the OG of the air raid. And so he understands that offense. He looked really clean. So Tanner Mordecai this year, but in terms of looking towards 2024, 2025, like this quarterback room, I think, is in phenomenal hands.
Yeah, it's going to be a battle to see who can play, and that's frankly what you want. Like in the past for Wisconsin, it was pretty much like, okay, who could just be the best out of our really weak room? And now, again, you might be stacking 2-3 deep who all can play and all would be on potentially starting on other teams, and that'll be if they can kind of implement that at Wisconsin, that'll certainly be a unique situation because they never had any competition in the past.
So moving over to the defensive side of the ball, we wanted to spend a lot of time on the offense just because it's going to be so different and it's exciting. Wisconsin's been one of the best defenses in the country for like the last decade, and it looks like they're going to be a phenomenal defense again. One of the big things is they're turning the ball over. Like those defensive backs, like when the ball's in the air, they are playing it and turning the ball over, and that is key, especially in the Big Ten West when possessions are at a premium. If you have the chance to take away the football, Wisconsin's going to make they're going to win a lot of football games being able to turn the ball over. I want to start on the front seven, though, because that's where, as NFL draft guys, you lose a guy in Keanu Benton and Nick Herbig, who we both really like in the 2023 NFL draft. How are you going to replace it? Gio Paz from the inside, in my mind, is an absolute monster. Like going up against some very good offensive linemen, he was an absolute force in the inside. The front seven looks good, and when you have a good defensive line, those veteran linebackers who've been there for a little bit, they're going to fly around the football field and make plays.
That's the thing. They just got to keep those two clean because Turner and Jungmonte, like those two are professionals. Both of them, I think, are going to be
really good ball players.
Yeah, relatively high picks in the league, and if they can just keep them free and let them work, that's obviously when you strengthen the defense. And you have two of them, you really should be able to do an effective job controlling just the rushing attack, and then again letting those cornerbacks and safeties go to work and take the ball away, because that's really been a thing I feel like for a long time Wisconsin's done a really good job doing.
Ricardo Hallman, 3 interceptions on the day. Shout out. Again, this Wisconsin team loses a lot of production on the defensive side of the ball. A lot of really good playmakers. Obviously lose Jim Leonard, but I was really impressed with the defense and especially the pass rush. Like, I just thought that defensive line, granted, a lot of them were working against the number 2 offensive line. Like, they were getting after it. And I think you're going to see a lot of turnovers. And talk about the new defensive coordinator, Mike Tressel. If you're talking about a defensive coordinator who's been able to develop at a high level, you go look at how many guys from the defensive side of the ball Cincinnati's put out into the NFL draft in the last couple of years under Mike Tressel. It's a very impressive list. Obviously, the defensive player of the year, rookie defensive player of the year, and Sauce Gardner. But a lot of those guys came in as like 3, maybe low 4-star recruits coming into Cincinnati and were developed into guys who were going in the top 100 in the NFL draft. So you feel really good about having the talent's going to be there. Now you're going to get a guy who is notable in developing All-Americans and NFL draft type of dudes. I'm excited to see how I feel like a lot of people are talking about how good this offense is going to be, and I'm excited to see the offense. This defense, like I don't think anything's changed on the defense side of the ball. This is going to be one of the better defenses in the Big Ten and in the country.
I mean, that's the thing you talk about what Trestle's done in his past, but he is not starting from like a weak base at this point. Leonard's done as good of a job as anyone in terms of taking guys who maybe not the highest recruits, but making them professionals. And you've seen, I mean, think guys like TJ Watt and the likes of him and some of those linebackers, they've all been having really successful professional careers. And that is very much a testament to what Wisconsin has done really under Paul Chryst and Jim Leonard. But I think this Wisconsin staff is coming into a really good situation as a staff that has done a really good job in their past as well. So it's just, can you crank it up and just make this team a little more modern, recruit a little bit at a higher level, which I think is honestly in there to do. And that'll be the key, because at this point you do have a really strong base. There's no reason that Wisconsin team probably should have been as weak as they were last year, frankly.
And you project to like, okay, how is this Luke Fickell coach team going to be in 2023? I feel like a lot of people are framing it as a rebuild. Like this is not a rebuild. This Wisconsin team has been one of the best teams in the Big Ten West for years. And I think Jake Butt, who was calling the game, made a really good analogy. Like under Paul Chryst, he was maxing it out, like bumping his head just against the ceiling. Now, the ceiling, like Paul Chryst, really couldn't get through that. And that's why you go a different way from Paul Chryst, who's won you a lot of football games. I think a lot of Wisconsin fans would say good words about Paul Chryst and say, we're going to go get a guy in Luke Fickell who is going to be able to kind of take us to where we want to be, potential Big Ten champions, college football playoff contenders. That's what Luke Fickell did at Cincinnati. That's what I think he can do at Wisconsin. And you look at 2023, especially in the Big Ten West, like, is Wisconsin your favorite to win the Big Ten West early, just in terms of, like, this team is very good. The Big Ten West not looking that good. It does seem like it's Wisconsin's for the taking early.
Yeah, and I would think so. It's been their division for forever, really. And I don't think Illinois had a really great year last year. I don't think they're at that level again. Purdue's turning over a fair amount of what made them good.
A lot of new coaches in the Big Ten West.
Yeah, in good young coaches. I'm hoping it gets better and it's more fun than it has been in the past.
Agreed.
But again, for right now, it does feel like Wisconsin's got the best base. All those other...
This isn't a rebuild. This is just like we're trying to take this program to the next level. The only way I see it maybe being a slow start is if this new offense just doesn't really get off the ground. But I think they not get off the ground in terms of like there might be some growing pains when you go from like we're playing 12 personnel, like 2 inline tight ends, to we're going to spread you out and not have any inline tight ends. Like there's a lot of differences in this offense. But bringing in a guy like Tanner Mordecai, who again I get did not look great in the spring game, he's run this offense for the last 2 years and was very successful at it. So in terms of getting it off the ground early, winning football games early, I think that's certainly in the cards for this Wisconsin team. But when you project to the future, you're just very, very excited about what this team can do. Now, we'll end it there. We got summer scouting coming up in a couple of weeks where we kind of dig in deeper to the personnel and the depth chart. So again, stay tuned to that. We appreciate you guys checking us out. If you do enjoy the content, of course, consider subscribing to the channel. That helps the fellas out a lot, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.